Recording in progress.
Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the February 26, 2024 Tualatin City Council regular council meeting. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Our first item tonight is the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilor Brooks. All right. That brings us to public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for anyone to address the City Council regarding an item that is not on tonight's agenda. Please keep your comments to about 3 minutes. If there's anyone here in the meeting room or in Zoom who would like to address the council, this would be the appropriate time. I have one person signed up in person, so I'll go ahead with that person first, and that's Mr. Ken Allen.
Yes, good evening, and thank you for having me. My name's Ken Allen, and I reside in Lake Oswego, and I'm privileged to be the fresh new developer of the Norwood and Boones Ferry site, which has a little bit of checkered past, but I'm here to bring a new, fresh approach. And what we've done, we've been under contract to buy the property since middle of summer. I've already purchased the 1 acre parcel that's in the middle of the Horizon property. And what you're seeing in front of you now kind of shows you the approach I'm taking. And we have a more sustainable approach opposed to a traditional developer that might come in with a preconceived notion of what they're going to do, come into planning, come into the city and go, hey, here's what we're doing, and kind of ram that through. What we've done is we take a couple steps back, and that is we meet with the community and we collaborate with the community, and we've had maybe 5 or 6 meetings. I was just talking to Danny, maybe it's only 4, but these are voluntary meetings. We've been holding them at the Marquee since August. We had one on December 7th, I believe, was our last one. And through that process, we've been able to explore sustainable practices and principles, which you'll see there in front of you. And one of the highest ones that's more positive was kind of a mix of housing and a mix of uses and a mix of price points. So rather than just one homogeneous product type, we're looking at a variety of that. And then other sustainable units, elements would be walkability and what are we doing with the trees and, of course, the traffic. So I just wanted to introduce myself and get you this information, and looking forward to a positive journey. And I think we have, with the Byram CIO and the other ones, we have a real collaborative effort going, and it's been real healthy. Of course, we've had to answer a lot of tough questions along the way, but I think that's also helped me understand, how to fit into the community a little bit better. I also have 2 other sites that I'll be working on, in Tualatin, and I'm real interested in the Stafford expansion, we'll call that. Hopefully my kids might be able to work on that one day. So thank you very much. And the other point, we're exploring affordable housing ownership. So, we have SEPA up on the hill, I call it, but maybe there's a possibility at this site to bring in some more attainable or affordable for sale housing. So we've just started to have discussions with different affordable housing operators. So we're pretty excited about that as well. So that was it, and I appreciate you listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to make a public comment? Do we have anyone on Zoom? Give them a second to raise their hand just in case. Nothing? All right. Well, that brings us to our consent agenda. These are items that are considered routine. They will be adopted by one motion unless a counselor would like an item removed and heard separately later tonight. Tonight, the consent agenda consists of item number 1, consolidation of approval of work session and regular meeting minutes of February 12th, 2024. Item number 2, consideration of approval of liquor license renewals for 2024. Item number 3, consideration of resolution number 5753-24, increasing the Tualatin River Greenway Trail Extension Project change order authorization amount. Item number 4, consideration of resolution numbers 5754-24, 5755-24, 5756-24, and 5757-24, accepting grant funds for traffic safety enforcement through Oregon Impact. Item number 5, consideration of resolution number 5758-24, exempting specific affordable housing developments from property taxes. And finally, item number 6, consideration of resolution number 5759-24, awarding a design-build contract for replacement of the Juanita Pole Center siding. Would any member of the council like an item pulled from consent and heard later tonight?
I move that we accept the consent agenda as read, approve the consent agenda as read.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as read. Any discussion on those motions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? It's unanimous. All right. That brings us to special reports. We have 2 special reports tonight. First being an update, an outside agency grant awardee, Neighbors Nourishing Communities, NNC, Mr. Chad Darby.
Good evening, esteemed counselors. Thank you for having me. Before I get going, I just want to say thank you so much for all the support that you've given Neighbors Nourishing Communities for the last several years. The grant funding has been fantastic and really kept the organization going, and we're at a very stable financial point right now. I don't know that we'll be asking for a lot of grant money going forward, no promises, but we're doing quite well financially, and I'll talk a little bit about our organization tonight. Before I talk about our organization, I want to talk a little bit about how we got here. After the Great Recession in the 2008 timeframe, there started to be a peak amount of publicity in the news about poverty moving to the suburbs. There were a lot of articles that came out at that time frame, and there's still some that keep coming out. There was also a lot of advertisements, as you'll see up there, regarding cheap apartments in Tualatin. And you probably are all well aware that there's 2 high poverty hotspots in Washington County. One of those is in the Tualatin-Durham border area, and that's been a poverty hotspot for a long time. My kids went to Bridgeport Elementary School at that time frame, and I became aware with the latest census data that came out that that school had gone from 20% low-income supported lunch program to over 65%. And I think it's stabilized at about 50 to 55% now. But that's a lot of kids that are on free and reduced price lunches. So I got together with several people in the community to talk about what we could do in the suburbs. And the one thing that I will share is if you look at an aerial photo of suburbs, you'll realize that there is a tremendous amount of green space. So we're, unlike inner cities, we have a unique opportunity to grow a lot of food locally and organically to provide to low-income families. And so that's what we set out to do. Our board is entirely non-paid, so we had to envision an organization that was fairly self-supporting. In other words, we were kind of guiding it, but it was a lot of volunteers coming forward in the community to do the heavy lifting. And what we came up with was a gardening organization. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to mention the box there. I was talking the other day with the Danielle, the director over at the Tualatin Schoolhouse Pantry, and she was pointing out that the need for meals has surged once again. She keeps expecting it to decline at some point, but there keeps being something that keeps driving it higher. They're serving about 850 families now, and the part of it is that COVID SNAP benefits have ended and the eviction moratorium has ended, and of course we all know going to the grocery store what food prices are doing. So a lot of things conspiring there to create a crisis. So our organization is really kind of simple in concept. What our non-paid board member does is we acquire plants, seeds, and provide education to gardeners in the Tualatin area and a few surrounding areas that we have gardeners come forward. We provide that free of charge, and they all make a pledge to donate 20% of what they grow. They get to keep 80% for themselves, which is good nutrition for them and their families, but 20% of that goes to the Tualatin Schoolhouse Pantry or other area pantries that are maybe closer to them. And for low-income gardeners, we provide also free garden space because a lot of them live in apartments, and also tools if they need it. Now, we are working on trying to get back into that space. I'm sad to say that pre-2016, we had a number of low-income gardeners. In fact, some of them were teaching our cooking classes, which were just wonderful. But after that administration came into place, they all went underground. Nobody wanted to be identified. So we haven't had a low-income or Hispanic gardener in our organization for the last 5 years. We're really trying to reconnect with that part of the community. But some of the successes that we've had is that at that time, or at the beginning of our organization, we had some businesses come forward. The most notable was Dr. Bertelson's Tualatin Park Vet Clinic. You've probably driven by there and noticed that he's got a lot of garden beds. He called us up and said, I want to give all of my business lawn to growing food and hosting low-income families. They produce about 800 pounds a year out of that little yard space there. And if we have any gardeners that come forward and say, I don't have a place to garden, they can go there and garden. Otherwise, he and his staff have been gardening it and making sure that it's productive. So the recipe really is simple. We have resident gardeners that come forward, about 30 to 45 every year. Businesses that provide either gardening space or materials. Our organization that kind of pulls it all together. And then, of course, your generous grant support, which helps us provide the plants. Pre-COVID, our plants were all grown by local school children and residents of Brookfield Nursing Home. Hope I got that name right. It's been a while since I've been there. And then with COVID, we had to switch to getting plants from a commercial nursery, and maybe we'll get back to the school kids growing those again at some point. So just some stats. To date, we've donated over 30,000 pounds of organic produce. I want to point out some of the benefits of the produce we grow. One is we focus on heirloom varieties that are highest in nutritional value. We carefully select what those varieties are going to be based on that. We also look for plants that will have some shelf life. So we provide winter squashes that'll cure and stay fresh for up to 6 to 12 months. And our gardeners love that because they've got, stuff they can eat throughout the year with that. We also, instruct our gardeners on harvesting. The produce that has the highest nutritional value is the stuff that's picked at the peak of ripeness. And so getting it fresh to the pantry right away provides a lot of value. And we think it's really important for the people that are struggling to have good organic fresh produce because, of sorts, it's a medicine. If you have bad nutrition as well as low access to good health care, it's just kind of a double whammy. So we try to do what we can to at least make sure that the nutrition is good. Some other things that we've done is cooking classes at the Winona Grange, gardening classes at schools and the libraries. As I said, we have 30 to 45 gardeners. That's been pretty steady year to year. We are working on increasing that this year. And one of the things that I wanted to say that you all should be proud of supporting is that I think this is one of the few cities in the country where every resident can have a free garden if they want one. And that is pretty unique. So with that, I want to share some of the things that I've heard from our gardeners. One in particular that I want to share, well, two in particular. One was a low-income gardener that asked if they could share their garden space with other people in their situation. And another was a gardener low-income gardener that said they wanted to give 20% of their produce to the pantry because the pantry had helped them. Now, if you know how much produce grows out of a garden plot, it's not enough really to support a family, even during the growing season. These people are offering to give, not out of excess, but out of the little that they have. That's the kind of generous spirit we've seen amongst the low-income families in Tualatin. It is, I think I've gotten more out of this than they have, because it's just so inspirational to see that kind of heartwarming effect. And also, all of the gardeners that live in homes in Tualatin have come forward and spent their weekends growing produce for the neediest in our community. So that is really good. That's all I have tonight. I'll take questions, but I did want to just plant one seed for you. As I mentioned, we're sitting on some cash right now. We had gotten a grant to build a greenhouse with Bridgeport Elementary School, and unfortunately, as Frank knows, because of the building permitting process in Tualatin, we abandoned that after 3 years. We spent just hundreds of hours and money trying to get through the process, and it wasn't going to happen. So at any rate, I would like to offer a potential partnership with the city of Tualatin. If you have green spaces where you would consider having a food forest or a community orchard, we would like you to think about that. It is something that started in the UK, it's spread across Canada, and it's starting to take root in the US. I don't know of too many in this area. There is Sabin Orchard in Northeast Portland, which grows fruit trees that volunteers support, and the community can come pick as they need. There's also a massive blueberry orchard up in the Tacoma area that's publicly accessible. But given the price of fresh fruit in the stores, it would be a wonderful thing to say that Tualatin has a community orchard space. And a lot of those plants are surprisingly low labor intensive, blackberries, raspberries, blueberries in particular. So please keep that under consideration as you're looking at new green spaces or what to do with older ones. Any questions?
Questions for Chad? All right, well, I want to thank you for the hundreds of hours you've put into this since 2014, probably thousands of hours now. You've been the spearhead behind this the whole time, leading the board and getting these things done, helping procure the plant starts over the last few years, teaching the kids, along with Caitlin, how to grow the starts. So you've been invaluable in this. I want to make sure people know that this was your baby and you've done terrific with this.
Thank you.
The board continues to look for growth, as Chad was saying, for this year, and doing a little bit more with social media and web presence and stuff like that. But I'm looking forward to this growing year again. As Chad mentioned, the plants that are handed out are pretty tough plants. The tomatoes usually do well, the cucumbers, basil, the people who teach us how to plant it, grow it, prune it. Caitlin and some of the OSU folks have tremendous knowledge to increase your yield. So it's a great fun time. I enjoy getting out there with my 3 beds. I remember that picture. So you didn't have it on this one. The gentleman who had that garden bed maxed out. Remember him?
Yeah.
Oh my God! Every square inch, and it was height and
It was
everything. And
9 feet tall with all the stuff he had in there.
yeah, it was amazing what he did with his bed. So, but yeah, it's unfortunate the greenhouse didn't work out. I know I've talked to Ross Hoover about the idea of a community orchard or some space in those parks, the parkland we developed or going to develop down near SEPA. So it's in the back of his head. He even mentioned it at a city council meeting already about that opportunity. So keep in touch with that. And I missed the last board meeting. Have we picked a date yet, or it's TBD?
No, May 11th, we're going to have our plant handout.
Okay.
And we're going to do it in partnership this year with the Tualatin Schoolhouse Pantry. So they're going to house it over there. It had been at Mitch Charter School every year up until now. but we're trying to do it over there and, get more low-income gardeners that are attending there to join us. I'll just leave you with one final factoid that really inspired me to take on this effort, and that is my kids were in middle school over here learning about World War II and community efforts, and they were learning about victory gardens, which got me reading more about them. And if you think there's nothing we can do in the suburbs about hunger and poverty, I would just remind us all that victory gardens in World War II produced 42% of the produce domestically consumed in the United States in suburban gardens. And we have a tremendous amount of space that we could do something with here to address hunger. So please think creatively about that and reach out to me if you have any thoughts or you hear of any businesses that would like to turn their lawns into garden spaces. So thank you for having me tonight, and thank you again very much for your support. I really appreciate it. Sure.
If somebody is interested in doing the garden, do they have to sign up in advance, or do they just go over there on, what was it, May 11th?
If people showed up by word of mouth, we would just register them at the site. But we always have an article in the Tualatin local newspaper. It'll come out in early April, I believe, or end of March. That has this year I'll have a QR code that takes you right to our site. There's like 4 questions, just what's your skill level and do you have a personal goal for the year, 20 pounds or whatever you think you want to donate, and some contact information, because we found, not surprisingly, a lot of people show up for free stuff and then ghost you. So we do have to insist on contact information so we can reach out to them during the year and make sure that they're committed and doing something. So, but it's a simple process, 2 minutes to sign up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very easy. Yep.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Chad. All right, that brings us to special report number 2, presentation of the Tualatin Planning Commission Annual Report for 2023. Welcome, Steve and Bill.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Steve Cooper, Assistant Community Development Director, and I'm joined with our Planning Commission Chair, Bill Beers. It's my pleasure to give the Tualatin Planning Commission Annual Report along with Bill. I've been the liaison on staff to the Planning Commission for my 5+ years here at the city. There we go. Thank you. And I would just like to specifically call out Bill, who's been a volunteer and on the Planning Commission for over 10 years. Is it 12?
It's
been a while.
In that ballpark, yeah. So, and overall, our Planning Commission has been really stable and has coalesced to be a great group. Our youngest Planning Commissioner in terms of terms is Brittany Valley, who's been there just over a year now. So our Planning Commission from left to right is Daniel Blockhuber, our Chair Bill in the back there, and then there's Ursula Kuhn, Brittany Valley in the center, Zach Weimer in the back there, our Vice Chair Janelle Thompson, and then one of our newer members, Randy or Randall Ledick is how you pronounce his last name. So Planning Commission role among the city's boards and commissions, the Planning Commission has a really important role, the first of which is satisfying our statewide planning goal number 1 for citizen involvement. It originally started out as the Committee for Citizen Involvement and then morphed into ultimately what's known today as the Tualatin Planning Commission. It serves 2 roles, which is a little bit unique compared to some of the other boards and commissions in the city. The first of which, typical to boards and commissions, is it serves as an advisory role, specifically making recommendations to the city council on land use, transportation, and related matters. And then also the Planning Commission serves as a hearing body and has the power to make quasi-judicial decisions, much like the City Council does, on a limited slate of land use matters. There we go. So on this slide, I'm just going to talk a little bit about specifically the Planning Commission recommendations that were made to City Council over the last year. The first of which is creation of the Salt Creek Employment District. That was a really important project, and we've already seen a pre-application conference from one of the developers in that area, and so we feel that it's well underway in helping to achieve the city's overall goals, specifically the urban renewal goals for the Southwest Basalt Creek development area. The second of which, a little bit more controversial, but important that the Planning Commission put in their recommendation as well, the Norwood rezone. And then last but not least, the Water Master Plan, which is among the several master plans that the Planning Commission has made recommendations to the council on since I've been here. So those are the recommendations. I just want to pause at this point, see if you had anything to add, Bill, from your experience.
I wanted to echo what you said earlier about a great group of people, and you can thank yourselves for that, for selecting the people that are on the commission. They are a pleasure to work with. Lots of research, because we do a lot of research before we get into the meeting, and we have good questions and discussions on all these topics.
Thank you, Bill. And so although the Planning Commission, as I mentioned, does have the power to make quasi-judicial decisions, strangely in 2023, which is the only year I can find on record that this is true, the Planning Commission made none. And we actually already have one teed up for April, so 2024 we'll have at least one. Go figure. Sorry, one more, please. Thank you. One more. Thank you. And just to echo what Bill mentioned a few moments ago, in addition to the traditional kind of twin roles of the Planning Commission, we as planning staff and staff from other departments throughout the city provide regular reports and communications and educational experiences to the Planning Commission to dovetail in with, as Bill described, they do a lot of reading and research on the actual cases that make it to them for recommendation or approval, but they also do a lot to stay apprised with the various plans and goings on, and there's a lot of current events, and so we see CFEC being a namely one where we've made several different updates on climate-friendly and equitable communities to the Planning Commission, which I think will really tee them up to be doing some of the decision-making related to that legislation in the coming months and year. We got some information on two housing-related matters. The first is the second bullet point, the Equitable Housing Funding Plan, and then informational analysis, the last bullet point, on the housing needs analysis, in particular a discussion of the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis and preview of what our future housing needs analysis updates might look like. The Planning Commission also got briefed by our city engineer, Mike McCarthy, on the Metro Regional Transportation Plan that just got adopted December of 2023. We also had the pleasure of having our Public Works Department provide an informational presentation on the Climate Action Plan. Particularly, it was nice that they were able to focus on some of the actions that might come back through the Planning Commission in the future. So again, kind of this idea of constantly learning and teeing up future work. And then last but not least, I did my best to do an imitation of Kevin, who probably could have done a lot better than I could have, but I did some legal training with the Planning Commission, and I think that it was really helpful and valuable, and hopefully we had a little bit of fun, but it was kind of dry, unfortunately.
Don't sell yourself short.
Okay, thank you, Bill. And with that, if you have anything to add, Bill, we're here for questions.
Oh, one thing to add, it is a pleasure to do this and to put this time in, and then hopefully hand off to you a recommendation, and not necessarily save you some time from weighing in on the matter, but to see what your representatives in the community have to say. So happy to do it.
Questions for Bill and or Steve? Council Brooks, then Councilor President Pratt.
Thank you both for your work and your long dedication. And thanks, Steve. I always am amazed with staff too, doing these committee works, just like tonight, after hours, when people don't usually clock in. So I appreciate that. I was curious, just from a committee perspective, I know we had the controversial things going on, but what would you say was the most interesting or inspiring or good piece from this last year?
The Basalt Creek work that we've done, like as you mentioned, I've been on for a while, so that was just a glimmer in Tualatin and Wilsonville's eye when I started, and now it's like turning into a real thing. So for me personally, kind of seeing that ground being broken down there is real satisfying.
Thank you.
I just wanted to thank the whole planning commission for all the effort. You're so focused on these specific topics, and it's obvious from reading the minutes from your meetings that you put a lot of thought and effort and look at different sides of an issue. And when you come to us, that's great information for us to make determinations, and that I know I appreciate it, and I would guess the whole council does.
Other questions, comments? Just like Council President Pratt just said, Bill, I appreciate your perspective, like you just mentioned, especially on the very difficult hearing. Read the transcript like Councilor Pratt said, and you guys asked terrific questions, very insightful, and it very much assisted me in coming up with my line of questions when we had that hearing. So I very much appreciate all the effort you guys put into that.
You're welcome, and I'll take these comments back to the team for our next meeting.
All right. Anything else for Bill or Steve? Well, thanks for coming tonight, Bill, taking some time out.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, that brings us to general business. Item number 1, Recycling Modernization Act, informational overview.
Okay. I was gonna wait for my benevolent introduction from on high.
There we go.
There she is. She's my rock.
There we
This is
go.
Lindsay.
We're good. I almost also said good afternoon, Mayor. Apparently we're on the same page. Good evening, everyone. I apologize for not being there in person. I'm a little under the weather. But I want to thank Travis for showing up and holding down the proverbial fort for us. We are going to be talking about the Recycling Modernization Act, and this is state legislation that's coming, that is in the process of being written and will go into effect in about a year and a half. So Travis and I wanted to make sure that council was kept abreast of what this means for Tualatin and Tualatin's ratepayers down the line. And so there's nothing required of the city right now. We did do a needs assessment survey last spring that all local governments did throughout the state, just to be eligible for some first round funding. So at the moment, there's nothing required of us, but we want to make sure that we are kept informed along this process and what this will eventually mean for Tualatin. So we're here tonight to talk about that, and Travis will run through that, and then we'll be back again periodically to keep you updated about what that might mean for the city over the next several years as this legislation rolls out. So Travis, take it away.
Thank you, Lindsay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you again for having me. You might remember I was just here on December 11th, so I know it's a lot of me in a short amount of time, so I acknowledge that. I will be brisk. This, like Lindsay said, this is a very dense 48-page piece of legislation that I've tried to condense down to like a Reader's Digest version. But so at any point, if you want me to stop and ask questions, we can do that along the way and at the end as well. Because while this is an overview, next slide, please. I just wanted to kind of hit the highlights because, like Lindsay said, there's nothing for immediate council action. So for a brief history on recycling in Oregon, Oregon started recycling just 40 years ago. So same year as like Return of the Jedi came out, and I was born in 1983, so I'm a little partial to that. But just to hold context, so we've been doing it for about 40 years, and when I get to a later slide, that'll be more relevant. And for context, the bottle bill started in 71, so 12 years earlier, the Oregon passed the bottle bill. In 1991, DEQ realized that they needed more teeth in the bill, so they came back to the legislature and asked for standards for plastic packaging, and then they wanted to set an official goal for collection, and then they established 8 recycling requirements that cities of population of 4,000 or more had to comply with. Next slide, please. In 2015, DEQ returned to the legislature because those goals had not been met or been effective. They added additional program requirements for cities over the population of 10,000, and they also added waste reduction elements to that as well. These are components of outreach and education and stuff that Lindsay and I work on throughout the year, and then we do an annual report to DEQ for the opportunity to recycle for Tualatin each year as well. This gets us to the Recycling Modernization Act, which was passed in 2021. This was primarily in response to the commodity market for recycling collapsing. Its main goal was to set up a standard uniform statewide collection list, so everything that was recycled in Tualatin is the same thing that's recycled in Gresham, is the same thing that's recycled in Lake County. That way there's no confusion, and then to kind of set a bare minimum for collection at the curb. On top of that, there was extended producer responsibility that was getting plastic manufacturers and producers involved and directly responsible for maintaining and stabilizing the recycling market here in Oregon. And then also to create a uniform standard of outreach and education in a variety of languages that would be freely available to all cities in Oregon. Next slide, please. So this is the slide I kind of wanted everybody to keep in context, saying that we've been recycling for 40 years. You can see that we've never quite got over the 43% recovery rate. This is with a lot of outreach and time and stuff by people beyond me. I've been in the industry for 5 years, and I can say that it's a tough row to hoe. So this kind of shows that basically the biggest dent to consumption was the Great Recession in 2008. See here. So, and then the main thing in terms of looking at the percentage of recycling here is that what led to China cutting off the import of commodities of recycled materials was the heavy contamination rate. So between 30 and 45% of the materials we were sending were contaminated. So while this looks like we were recycling as much as 40% of the material, we know that as much as a third of that was also trash. Next slide, please. This one is the same material graph with the population growth overlay for the state of Oregon. And so while trash and population grew very similarly at about 30 and 34% respectively from 1992 to 2020, recycling grew 67%. So the volume of material that we were hauling for recycling grew almost double the rate of trash. Next slide, please. This is a brief timeline of what happened there. So you have basically the end of end markets as we knew it for commodities for recycling, and that led DEQ to take action to prevent the basic collapse of recycling in the state of Oregon. They formed a steering committee. This lasted for about 2 years. They brought together a diverse array of voices and backgrounds from industry, regulators, and community partners. Okay, and next slide, please. The foundation for the new system is to make a circular economy versus a linear economy. This was meant to give the buy-in for producers to not only help with the recycling at the end of market, but to design products that were easily and better to recycle. The example most commonly is like the disposable plastic water bottle. If you remember them for like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, they were denser, they didn't crinkle as much. And now it takes about 20 of those plastic bottles that crinkle up to make the same amount of plastic volume on the back end as they did 5 years ago. Next slide, please. In order to get producers to pay for it, they're setting up what are called producer responsible organizations. These are basically nonprofit organizations where the producers will pay into the system, your Coca-Colas, your Krogers, your Starbuckses. They will pay in a proportion to the amount of plastic packaging they import and sell in the state of Oregon. That will determine how much they provide to the PRO, which then the PRO will use to cover the system costs. Examples of PROs that we already have in Oregon are paint, e-waste, and medications. So all of those systems, they're paid for by the producers of those products. Mattresses, I have a star in here. It's very similar to the Recycling Modernization Act, but the first round plans have been rejected for mattress recycling. What the PROs came up with basically didn't get any takers. They were offering too little. Basically, it wasn't enough to actually fund the system. So DEQ's told them to come back with a new plan. So hopefully next year we will know what we will be seeing in terms of mattress recycling. Next slide, please. So there are currently 4 states with extended producer responsibility in the United States. That's Maine, Colorado, Oregon, and California. Washington has been on the cusp for just over a year now with their RAP Act, but it has not passed yet. Next slide, please. These next couple slides are kind of dense in terms of the images that they have, but these are the near final and most recent draft of the new uniform collection list. So this, starting July 1st of 2025, will be what you can put in your curbside collection. One of the big items that was removed was like quick service cups, your Starbucks cups, your McDonald's cups, and that was primarily because there was concerns about empty, clean, and dry. So all the items that go in your recycle cart need to be empty, clean, and dry. And there was a concern with most of those being utilized out on the go. People weren't going to wash them before putting them in the system, which would just lead to contamination. Next slide, please. These are primarily depot items, and we will see more of those on the next slide. But motor oil, computer, large electronics, and metal and glass are all going to be designated for depot collection. Outside of the metro area, municipalities will not be required to curbside collect glass. And that's because glass is one of those items that has almost a neutral environmental impact in terms of recycling when you impact or calculate the carbon footprint of transporting that material. Next slide, please. So these are the really hard to recycle items that are being added to the system. The talks are basically to put these for depot collection. This is everything from your tub lids, scrap paper, and then harder to recycle items like the polystyrene. Polystyrene is a big one because as part of this act, responsible end markets and sustainable practices has to be a big part of that. So places like Agilex won't fit for that. So currently all of the polystyrene we collect here goes to Tigard. That will no longer be an outlet starting July 1st of next year. There are chemical processing facility and only mechanical recycling will be allowed for polystyrene going forward. Next slide, please. So this is kind of the same timeline as earlier, just exactly where we're at now. We are in the second round of rulemaking. So DEQ has released the first round, which was basically the curbside collection list that I just shared. And now we're working on 2 fees that I'll go over, which is the contamination reduction fee and the commodity risk assessment fee. And then again, the PROs are supposed to submit a plan for DEQ review at the end of this year. But due to some of the PROs pulling out of Oregon, the timeline for that has been postponed. So, and part of the good things about filling out the needs assessment survey we did with Lindsay last year is that any city that filled out the needs assessment will have a grace period starting July 1st of 2025 for those funds to actually be available before you have to roll out new programs. Next page, please. So in terms of the needs assessment survey, I covered on here what the PROs will have to cover for Tualatin to meet the expanded services and then like the depot collection. So in terms of citing a depot in the city of Tualatin, the PROs will be on the hook for funding all of that development, the property and all that, and then we would run it. So it would give Tualatin residents another location to drop off those materials throughout the week. Next slide, please. So contamination is one of the largest factors of the Recycling Modernization Act, but the cost of that is going to be borne by the producers themselves. So And that's to encourage them to develop those education materials and make that kind of more effective. Next slide, please. These are the first round. We just got these a couple weeks ago from DEQ. They're estimating somewhere between $375 per ton to $476 a ton for the first 2 years of operating this system. That's about 4 times what it is now to process recycling. So it's a substantial increase. But again, these are first round drafts of these numbers. Next slide, please. In terms of the commodity risk fee, this is a fee that's meant to kind of stabilize that market for those materials. And that's to prevent anything from like the China sword thing happening again that would jeopardize some of the processors. So in theory, as commodity values fluctuate, the PROs will have to step in to help those material recovery facilities maintain their operations. Next slide, please. And so those are in a very similar situation where it's about $200 to $287 a ton on top of the previous figure to maintain that part of the system. Next slide, please. And this is a visualization of what that total expense will be for the PROs for just those 2 fees alone. And then I factored it in with the recovered tons from 2021. So as you can see, the system itself will be on the hook for just over almost $1.5 billion for 2025 alone. DEQ has said repeatedly these costs will not be passed on to consumers. The PROs have said the opposite. So again, this is still in the rulemaking phase. Urge everybody to be in contact with their legislators in terms of thoughts and opinions on the system. But we imagine that these will impact prices at the store. Next slide, please. In terms of processors themselves, DEQ, so again, responsible end markets, that's going to be part of the mandate by DEQ that you can only send these materials to permitted or certified facilities. DEQ can only permit in-state facilities, so out-of-state facilities can get a certification that they meet the standard, and then we are going to incorporate that with our annual reports to the city, how that chain of custody went. The city will also have to annually report to DEQ where your materials went, and so there'll be an insurance mechanism for that. The largest potential increase here in terms of cost is the living wage factor. So everybody at the MRFs, the material recovery facilities, will have to be paid a living wage. Some processors, like some nonprofits in Oregon, have already suggested that this could put them out of business. Because again, there's just not a whole lot of money in recycling. So still more to come, but that's the key in terms of like the actual processing and doing the labor. Next slide, please. So in terms of depots, we will be expanding our Wilsonville depot and then also siting a depot here in Tualatin. And Lindsay and I will keep you guys up to speed as this process moves forward. Several months ago, there were as many as 3 PROs that were going to operate in Oregon. Now we're down to just 1. So they've already sent feelers out to certain cities to see exactly how they're going to do this program. So as soon as we get reached out to, we'll be back to update you guys in terms of like what they're forecasting and what their plans are for Tualatin. Next slide, please. So in terms of the education and outreach, they're going to be required to develop all of the multimedia resources for schools, any sort of outreach events, and that's going to be required to be in, I don't remember, I think it was 12 languages. But it's all going to be free to any city in the state of Oregon, and it's all going to be the same messaging. So again, everything that's said in Tualatin will be the same thing said in Gresham. And it's just meant so if you move around the state, you're still recycling the same thing, and you're not hearing different messaging. Next slide, please. So Lexi and Gretchen are your guys' 2 reps with DEQ that cover Washington County. If you guys have any direct questions in terms of how the rulemaking process is going or some of the like more DEQ specific things, definitely give them a call or shoot them an email. They're 2 really great contacts for you to have. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. And if you guys have any questions, and the QR code takes you to the RMA website on DEQ's page if you needed it. Sorry, that was a lot. I know it was.
I have one question.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Thank you very much for the
course.
information. I was quite surprised that there's some things that aren't recyclable, the shredding of paper, or like home office. Why is that?
That's because when you throw it in your cart, like it would go everywhere. So then when the truck dumps it into the truck, it would catch air and stuff. So that's why it's going to be a depot thing. So like you'll probably drop it off in a bag of some sort, hopefully a paper bag rolled up.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's meant to prevent that contamination in your environment. So yeah,
Wonderful, thank you.
yeah, of course.
Other questions? Councilor Brooks?
As far as the depot goes, could you explain, is it going to be kind of like what's at Republic right now, where there's different places for different items?
Yep.
I have that, and then any idea where it's going to go? And my last thing is, are you saying that glass is not going to be in the glass recycle thing anymore, and it's going to go to the depot?
So we'll start with the glass. Glass will, since you're still in the metro area, we'll still be collecting curbside glass, but it will also be at the depot as well. When the PROs reach out to Lindsay and I, that's when we'll be coming back to City Council for you guys to start thinking about where in Tualatin is the best place for this in terms of access for residents, in terms of traffic flows and stuff like that. And then Lindsay and I will probably be putting together several models, whether it's a staffed depot, whether it's 5 days a week, 7 days a week, what are the hours. In terms of all the infrastructure costs, the PROs are going to cover the land, the build out, security, and some of the staffing. So, and then we will do all of the hauling and stuff. But all of the like normal recycling can go there on top of your e-waste, batteries, oil, and then the hard to recycle items that the PROs are responsible for.
So it's going to be, what we would take over there are, is there anything that's not going to be collected, that's being collected now?
No. The list is expanding.
Is expanding, and then you can take those things to other places?
Yeah.
And then you're saying the PROs are paying for it and there's one left? Can you tell me again what PRO stands for?
Producer Responsible Organization.
yeah.
So it's they're kind of like collectives. In Europe and Canada, and in Maine, they don't have to be for nonprofits. They don't have to be a nonprofit, so they can make money doing that business. Again, it's a lot of work. And currently there's only one, which is Circular Action Alliance, that's remained. And so they're now going to then have to pool all plastic producers into that one fund. And then so they're going to basically get a bill from DEQ saying, this is how much we're projecting it's going to be for 2025. Then they're going to fraction that off and basically bill their members for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Councilor Pratt?
Oh gosh, I lost my first question.
No rush.
Oh, the depots.
Yeah.
So where will this, because it says they want them like wherever there's a post office basically, or that.
They would like that level of
That's the-
density.
Okay.
But-
So if we want one in Tualatin, is the city giving up, where's the land coming from?
The PROs will have to pay for the purchase of that. So
Okay.
either the city through Public Works would manage that site, or you would designate us to do that, and then we would do that. So it can go either way, but either way, we would still be hauling the material.
Okay, and then I'm assuming it's probably in the weed, I'm getting the weeds.
No, you're
here, but, who decides who the producers, or the company certified as producers? Who determines that?
Who determines who is a producer of the material?
Well, okay, so I guess what I'm getting to is like, if you're a company and you want to be cost savings and you're not that concerned about sustainability and more on profits, why wouldn't you put your eggs in something that's not on this list?
Yeah, that's a very good, and that's part of like the point of this legislation is to move them away from things that aren't on this list. So there's a lot of packaging that isn't on here, like your Starbucks cup. So
So will they be a producer?
So Starbucks is a huge producer of plastic waste in the
Right.
state. And so they will be paying in based on the number of lids they sell, the number of cups they sell.
Okay,
And
so
so
it's not
just because
just the
their cup
recyclable.
itself isn't going to be in your commingled container, they're still going to be paying for overall plastic recycling.
Okay,
So
that
they're
makes a
still on
lot
the
of
hook for a
sense.
while.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Other questions?
No, I'm fine. Question was answered. Thank
Okay.
So going back to that 1.5 billion,
Yeah.
that was 1.5 billion just for Oregon or for?
For Oregon, and that's just for the contamination reduction fee and the commodity risk assessment fee. That has nothing to do with education and outreach or the expanded services or the expanded PRO collection list.
And it's coming from the producers of the materials
Yes.
without a price increase to us.
That DEQ claims that the Oregon market is so small in terms of national companies that that's not going to happen. But the PROs themselves have verbally told us that they expect prices would go up.
Yeah, I mean, they're gonna pass it on.
Yes, somebody's going to have to pay for it, so.
Any other questions? Counselor Gonzalez?
Just for clarification, so we're going to be billing the producers, right? And so the producers eventually will alternate their producers. No, they won't be producers. That's the goal eventually, is to get them to switch to
More sustainable products, yes.
No, this is not a revenue generating mechanism for you guys, because eventually if you're essentially going to set up this system that eventually in time, if everybody's doing what they're supposed to, it should be eliminated, or the need would be less. Would that be correct?
Correct, and we're not a material recovery facility, so we take Tualatin's recycling to Pioneer or Northwest Recycling. So those facilities, instead of billing us like they currently bill us for your recycling and disposal, that's what those fees are meant to reduce that. So like when we come in later in the year and we present, like our largest expense for Tualatin is disposal and recycling. So in theory, that component of what Tualatin is paying should go down. But yeah, the hauling and that stuff's it's gonna stay the same. Yeah, of course.
Anything else? And this is supposed to be implemented by when?
The rollout date is July 1st, 2025. And so only cities that submitted the needs assessment survey will have a grace period. So curbside collection has to change at that point. So what you can put in your cart will change at that point. There could be some lag in terms of like the coverage of that disposal and stuff. So Tualatin did fill it out, so we'll be keeping you guys up to speed in terms of like if we need to push out any education that delays some of those materials going in there. And in terms of like the types of plastics going on the list, they have shifted to a size variant, like 2 to 3 inches by 2 to 3 inches versus like saying it's a number 2 plastic or it's a number 4 plastic or it's a number 5 plastic. So that's why Lindsay had mentioned before, we're going to be coming back several times to keep you guys up to speed on this.
And then as far as the other cities around us, because I can, God, you know, in the metro region, so just look around us, so Tigard, Sherwood, Wilsonville, if all of us don't have this, then you could have folks come in from a neighboring city dumping it into yours. Is there any disadvantage of, say, a city doesn't do this? Is there any penalty for the city? Because say if we have to set this up, and it's through you, and you have to raise our rates or something, and people from outside the city are dumping stuff in our depot, what's the impact to us? Because their city doesn't have it.
So the PROs will have to cover the expense of that recycling disposal from the depot. So it won't matter where that material comes from.
Right.
But I can tell you that Sherwood, Tigard, Lake Oswego, and we're working with Lake Oswego and Wilsonville, they're all in putting these in.
Okay.
So in terms of your area, it's very dense. In Marion County where we work, 2 of our 14 cities chose to opt out of the survey, so they get no grace period starting next year, and they've already been warned by DEQ.
What happens to that?
They're gonna have to start taking all that material, and it's gonna get passed on to the ratepayers.
Okay.
So,
All right.
yeah, unfortunately.
Okay. This is a brain twister. All right.
Yeah, and that's kind of like, you know, the legislation built the framework and then DEQ got to build the system from that. So it's, we'll see if the legislature steps back in or not. So,
All right. Anything else? Go ahead.
yeah.
I'm just gonna make a comment that I think it's gonna be really difficult to get this out to the public and have them comply.
It's a lot, and that's why Lindsay and I have been looking, and why we asked for time is this is basically just starting it out the gate. Again, this is very dense legislation. There's multiple rounds of rulemaking to try to iron some of this stuff out, and then even after they choose how the system is going to work, it's going to be a big lift after that as well.
Because you're losing the convenience of curbside on some of this stuff.
For some items, but in theory, there should be less illegal dumping as well, especially with things like propane tanks or polystyrene and stuff like that. And hopefully less wish recycling, which is people throwing things that we know can't be recycled into the recycling container.
Thank you for coming tonight.
Yeah, thank you guys. I really
Councilor
appreciate your
Pratt.
time.
All right, that brings us to item number 2, Planning Division Short-Term Code Update Bundle, PTA 24-001. Welcome, Steve and Aaron.
Hello again, Mayor and Council. Steve Cooper, Assistant Community Development Director. Aaron is going to give the bulk of the presentation. I just wanted to quickly tee up our presentation for tonight. So you may recall we were last year on January 22nd presenting our overall division work plan, and this was one of the items that we got council direction to pursue. And so we're here to provide, basically fill in a little more detail around what this short-term code amendment consists of, and give you all an opportunity for any feedback if you have any before we kind of launch into the next steps, which Aaron will get into a little more, but basically involves getting a recommendation from the Planning Commission on the text of the code and then coming back to you for potential final adoption. And with that, I will turn it over to Aaron.
Thanks, Steve, and good evening. If we could advance to the next slide. So you'll see that our agenda for tonight isn't as meaty as our previous discussion over the state legislation. But I want to start with a summary of the project purpose and then follow it up with an overview of the proposed changes. And then we'll go on to the next steps of the amendment process, and we will conclude with a Q&A. Next slide. So the project purpose is essentially to expand the hours of operation for retail sales of cannabis facilities and medical dispensaries. And then we're also looking to add a variety of uses into certain zones, which I'll get into more detail on the following few slides. But just at a very high level, we're looking to add a health and fitness facility as a permitted use in this general commercial zone. Also, retail sales of home improvement and materials as a permitted use in our central commercial or downtown zone. And lastly, battery electric vehicle showroom as a permitted use in the mixed-use commercial zone. Next slide. And as Steve mentioned, kind of the impetus of this project started with our conversation about the planning work program. Essentially, throughout the course of last year, we received some various requests from the business community and property owners just looking to add some permitted uses to their land rights. And then we found that these uses do support our comprehensive plan goal 4.2, which is to encourage business retention, growth, and attraction. So that's a good thing. Next slide. So you'll see that we have various amendments to various chapters. For Chapter 39, the main component that I wish to highlight is that we're adding some use category definitions, in particular for battery vehicle showroom uses. We wanted to create some distinction between that use and traditional auto lots, which have not been historically permitted in Tualatin. So when we're talking about battery vehicle showrooms, that use would be similar to a Tesla showroom that you commonly see in malls. So these showrooms are generally mid-sized tenant spaces, and they don't require large lots to store vehicles. And then moving on to Chapter 53, retail sales for home improvement materials and supplies has been added as a permitted use, as I mentioned previously. But we're also proposing a square footage limitation of 65,000 square feet for this use. And that's mainly to curtail getting any big box retailers that might be like a Home Depot or something. And then for this chapter, we're also adding some clarifying language and approval criteria for outdoor storage in the zone. Moving on to Chapter 54. For health and fitness facility uses, those will now be permitted in the general commercial zone if this ordinance passes. This category does include pickleball, and health and fitness facilities may also include outdoor facilities. So with that in mind, we're proposing adding standards and limitations to outdoor health and fitness facility uses, mainly just making sure that there's a buffer between the residential zones and that there's a screening component. And for Chapter 57 in our mixed-use commercial zone, I mentioned allowing that battery electric vehicle showroom use. This will also include some floor area caps and will specify that all the sales inventory must be enclosed in a building, so no outdoor storage. And then lastly, for Chapter 80, we're looking to expand cannabis hours of operation. Our current code allows for 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., and we're looking to expand that from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., just so we can stay relevant with some of the competing cities and their business. Next slide, please. So moving on to next steps, staff will begin drafting findings to applicable code criteria and state rules. It is anticipated that the project will be presented to our Tualatin Planning Commission on March 20th, where we'll be looking for a recommendation to bring back to you. And then we're hoping to bring this back to council April 22nd, April 22nd for ordinance consideration. And our plan is to bring 2 ordinances forward to you, so we'll keep the cannabis ordinance separate just in case further discussion is desired by council. And we'll also do our public noticing in March. So moving on to the next slide. You'll see that there are various opportunities for public comment, including our Planning Commission meeting and City Council hearings. We also will publish a public notice in the Tualatin Times as required by our code. Next slide. So in closing, we are looking for confirmation that council remains in support of this effort and that staff should continue working through the amendment process. And with that, I'll open up for any questions of staff or any discussion.
Questions? Council Brooks?
With the pickleball screening, are we talking about like sound and light and things like that?
So what I've baked into the code right now is some fence screening. It needs to be outside of 500 feet from a residential zone. And that there is hours of operation limitations, so we'll maintain quiet hours, which I think is between, I want to say 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., just to kind of curtail some of those nuisances that we might see or hear from the community.
Yeah, I had read something. I'm not a pickleball player. Don't come after me. But I had read something about just the tone of the sound wave. I remember when we had the sound study guy come about the bridge. And so I had read something about why that sound bothers people. So I just want to take that into consideration where we have these buffers and how it carries and think through that. That's just something that that came up for me.
I think that's a great consideration. I did some preliminary research where I looked at other cities that have looked into doing noise studies for pickleball use specifically, and I found some details out of Colorado. I want to say it could have been a community outside of Denver. I can't remember which one, but they concluded that between 500 to 600 feet from residential zones generally will alleviate that nuisance noise or that visceral effect you get from that noise.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask too, just since you guys are here, just from the presentation about the community garden nonprofit, can you just tell me what the story is with the regulations on a greenhouse? Like, I'm confused.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think it goes back to what's in our building code, and I'm not the most knowledgeable, but I'm guessing that it has something to do with accessibility for all. So maybe having a paved surface and a ADA surface to access the greenhouse. That's kind of where my head goes, but I don't know, Steve, do you have anything?
Yeah, I'm
to
not
add?
sure I recall the details, but I do recall it being building code related. Just because it's like a occupancy that allows people from the public to come in it, so it's held to a different standard than like, say, if you had a greenhouse in your backyard.
Yes. So,
But we can get more details if,
yeah, I'm just curious. And then I guess and then we're talking about the development code. Can you just give me a really quick, skinny, because I got it confused right now, and just also for people listening, the difference between the building code and this code.
Yeah, so the Tualatin Development Code pertains more to site development as opposed to building development. So because it's local, we have the power to regulate what's in it. With the building code, it's more state mandated. So I think that's the main distinction. I don't know if Steve has anything else he'd like to share.
yeah, I mean, the building code is fire life safety considerations, and so that's where occupancy classifications, for example, come into consideration as who's using the building. Whereas like the development code pertains to land use, and so it's more like orientation of structures, like where they are on a property, how tall they can be, how large they can be, and so forth, not necessarily with consideration to the specific user of the property always, although there are like conditional uses or these type of standards that we're talking about tonight with the noise standards are like dimensional standards that are specifically geared towards a set of uses.
So if we were looking at encouraging people around, and like sustainable stuff with building, that would be in the building code or in the development code?
Do you have something in mind, like as an example?
Say there was some kind of tax credit for like a light colored roof.
That, I mean, the light colored roof could be an aesthetic design standard that could be applied through the land use code. And so that's like, because it's an exterior coloration, that is something that is a land use code. I don't know that it could be applied through the building code specifically. So that's one where, but then like solar panels, for example, are regulated by the building code because there's life safety considerations, making sure that they're affixed to the roof in the right way, that they don't fall on people walking by or what have you. And so there's kind of each specific thing, kind of in the same way that our climate action plan is divided into like different focus areas, the same would be the answer, I guess, to sustainability, is that some things might be land use or development code related, and then others might be found in the building code.
Okay, I'm sorry to take it way off, but I just, when I think through this stuff, I just want to know where to compartmentalize stuff. So thanks a lot for all the information.
Councilor Pratt.
Oh, I just want to thank you for your examples, like the building size, because that really helps make sense in my head why you came up with those items. So thank you.
Great, thanks for that feedback.
Other questions? Discussion? What they're looking for is direction, council direction to move forward with this.
I'm fine with moving forward like we had discussed, just for me.
I am for moving forward specifically with pickleball. Anything that we can do to get people out, moving, active is super important. I wish this was already put done a long time ago. I have to be candid with you guys. This is just dragging out too long. Proved. Done. Okay? That's it. Just people out there playing, talking, enjoying. Senior people love pickleball. Okay? So sorry to go on that, but it's just, it's frustrating when, and I understand there's a process, but it's frustrating for me when we have businesses actively trying to move forward and they're being held up by city regulations and bureaucracy. So not any one person here, I understand our process is as such. I get it. But it's frustrating hearing these same conversations over and over again in my short time that I've been here. So thank you.
So that's a yes.
All right.
Councilor Sacco? Councilor Reyes?
I'm a yes too, I think.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Proceed.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right. Item number 3, Stafford area update. City Manager Lombos.
Well, one of the reasons that it's falling on me is that, you know, it's not on our work plan, our planning work plan, and it's a high enough policy discussion that that I've been involved in my entire 17 years here. And so I've kept an eye on it, and I've brought in certainly the technical experts as needed. And Steve certainly knows much more than I do about the planning world. And I told him, I'm not making this presentation because I'm trying to step on your toes. To me, it sends a message that we've got staff working on a lot of stuff, and this is not on our work plan. So you've got me. But I do want to thank Steve and all of his context, and Kevin has been involved as well, and they're available to answer questions. So apparently this isn't working. So I told Bates that I was going to make some, like, I don't know, like song and dance every time I needed to switch slides. So this is a map of the Stafford area. It's in the green. It's approximately 4,500 acres. It's located in northwest unincorporated Clackamas County. For the most part, north of I-205, east of Tualatin, south of Lake Oswego, which is in the pink, and west of West Lynn, which is in the yellow. Due to its close proximity to our border, Tualatin has been actively engaged in any discussions about the future of the Stafford area for many years, dating back to the 1900s, the 1990s, probably the 1900s as well.
You've been here a long time.
I'm younger than I look. All right, next slide. This is also the Stafford area. So in 2010, the entire metro region went through what is known as the Urban Rural Reserves process, which was an exercise to agree on a 50-year plan to designate lands that would ultimately be developed to urban standards and lands that would remain rural in function and character. In 2012, the Stafford area was designated by Metro and then approved by the state agency as an urban reserve. It was divided into 4 sections for A, B, C, and D, although 4D has not been a point of contention or part of the conversation for future planning. And if it's a whole other story that we don't have time to get into tonight, but just for sake of clarity, 4D is not what we're talking about. We're only talking about 4A, B, and C. The cities of Tualatin and West Lynn, among many other interested parties, appealed this designation, asserting that Metro did not use the proper criteria in their analysis. Essentially, that the analysis did not properly factor in the transportation requirements, basically saying that this area could not meet the transportation requirements or criteria for an urban reserve. And we felt, and we argued that it should have been designated as a rural reserve or left undesignated. The Court of Appeals agreed with us and sent the matter back to the state agency in charge of approving the designation, so the Land Conservation Development Commission, LCDC. So in 2015, after several years of legal action involving Tualatin, LCDC remanded or sent the decision back to Metro and Clackamas County for further proceedings and to live out the Court of Appeals opinion. Next slide. So based on this remand from LCDC, we entered into a series of facilitated dialogues. And those were convened in 2015 and 2016. Those included the logos that you see here, Metro, Clackamas County, and the 3 cities. There were 2 electeds from each of those organizations. Mayor Ogden at the time and Nancy Grimes were our representatives, along with several staff people. It is interesting to note that the current city manager of Lake Oswego was the Metro CEO at the time and was at the table representing Metro, and now she's in Lake Oswego. And the planning director for Metro, John Williams, at the time, and was at the table, is the city manager of West Lynn now. So a lot of institutional knowledge, frankly. These dialogues covered a lot of ground, but ultimately the 3 cities agreed to drop the litigation efforts contingent on a series of agreements that were memorialized in this 5-party agreement. The cities believed and were assured that the concessions that we agreed on provided enough certainty and surety that the cities would be in control of the timing and pace of planning and development. Otherwise, we would not have dropped our legal action. So the 5-party agreement, which was signed in June of 2017, specifically agreed that the governance of Stafford would be by 1 or more of the cities upon expansion of the urban growth boundary. In other words, there will not be a new city of Stafford, according to the 5-party IGA, and it won't develop or urbanize as unincorporated Clackamas County. So it has to be under the jurisdiction of one of the 3 cities, or multiple. The agreement also requires concept planning and public facilities planning prior to the addition of any part of the Stafford area into the urban growth boundary. The timing for commencement and completion of a concept plan was left to the governing city, as well as the pace and timing of future development. So the agreement is effective until 2060, at which time I will not be working here. So the 3-party agreement. Once the 5-party agreement was signed, the 3 cities convened to discuss the specifics. The goal was to agree on the terms and conditions that the 5-party agreement did not cover and that did not necessarily pertain to Metro and the county. The 3-party agreement was signed in February of 2019. It was signed by Mayor Bubenik and expires like the 5-party IGA in 2060. The 3-party agreement outlines coordination of concept planning, appropriate notice, citizen involvement, and factors to consider when entering into concept planning. Finally, the IGA contemplates establishing boundaries or areas of interest for each of the 3 cities who would be doing concept planning. Criteria are included in the 3-party IGA for how those boundaries could be drawn. And as of this date, there are no boundaries or areas of interest drawn, and there are no additional amendments to the 3-party IGA. This map is the plan from a few years ago from ODOT that is for the I-205 widening to 3 lanes and then expanding the Abernathy Bridge. And I put it up here because this was really the basis of our understanding for the 3-party IGA of how 205 would need to be expanded. So we have always agreed, the cities have always agreed that one of the most significant challenges for the urbanization of Stafford in terms of cost and the potential for severe negative community impacts is providing for adequate transportation. The infrastructure transit service, which honestly has never been, TriMet has never been at the table in any of these negotiations. This concern has long centered on the traffic congestion around 205. So acknowledging this, the 3-party IGA explicitly states that before the cities can complete concept planning, I-205 must be widened to 3 lanes in each direction from Oregon City to Stafford Road, and the Abernathy Bridge must be replaced or reconstructed. And And Bates is doing such a good job of reading my mind. So the area was divided into south of the Tualatin River and north of the Tualatin River. And it was agreed that a city will not complete or adopt a concept plan for any part of Stafford until, so south of the river, the I-205 project has received preliminary design approval, funding has been identified and appropriated, and construction is scheduled to begin in 2 years or less. And then north of the river, nothing can happen until December 2028, even if the I-205 project moves forward before then. And then after 2028, the I-205 project conditions must all have been met. So in 2020, David Marks filed a petition with LCDC requesting that it, one, nullify and invalidate the three-party IGA, saying that they violated Metro rules, and asked to amend and clarify the five-party IGA. So after review, LCDC determined that the IGAs did not constitute land use decisions under the significant impacts test, and then Marks appealed that decision to the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals reversed LCDC, agreeing with Marks that the IGAs constituted land use decisions, and they remanded that back to LCDC for further consideration. So that we are here. Currently, LCDC has jurisdiction over this matter, and we anticipate that a hearing will be set for sometime this year. So we are in active litigation. So that brings us to the current status. As the three cities' long-standing concerns of cost of public infrastructure, including water, sewer, and stormwater, remain. A study was undertaken in 2017 by an organization called Fregonese and Associates, along with OTAC, which is an engineering firm, that looked at one specific development scenario. And the map here that is kind of hard to read, but you can see that low-density residential housing is closest to Lake Oswego and West Lynn. And then denser development, including a town center, which is the kind of the darker purple, and employment is closer to Tualatin. This very specific scenario would develop approximately 1,500 of the 4,500 acres in the Stafford area and would have over 7,000 households, that's the red bar, and over 8,000 jobs. Essentially a city the size of existing Tualatin. So we currently have 11,000 households, right at 11,000 households. As you can see here, the high-level estimate in 2017 for public infrastructure, including roads, sewer, water, and stormwater, was $800 million. Concept planning would certainly give us a more accurate estimate, but there is no question that infrastructure costs and delivery are a vital concern and a challenge of who would pay. There is, of course, the continued concern of traffic and transportation infrastructure that would be needed to serve growth and development in the area. Tolling and diversion are already top of mind in terms of how they will impact the existing environment, much less with added growth and development. The ODOT plans to widen 205 are now unfunded with no certainty of when that project conversation will be revisited. The question has been raised as to whether the Stafford area is a needed component for our housing needs or future job needs. The our 2019 housing needs analysis said that Tualatin's housing needs over the next 20 years could be accommodated by rezoning existing land rather than urban growth boundary expansion. And our economic opportunities analysis, also done in 2019, did not recommend that Tualatin meet its employment land needs by urban growth expansion, rather concluded that Tualatin has substantial redevelopment potential, due to a majority of redevelopable lots being in areas zoned for employment. One unknown, of course, is how the current legislative priority of housing will impact this area. However, the anticipated cost of bringing public infrastructure to the area before any development, housing or otherwise, could happen would most likely dampen the ability to build the housing in Stafford for the foreseeable future, even if the governor herself dictated it. A possible next step would be to convene with the other cities in Clackamas County to discuss any number of things, the current status, any short or long-term plans that include the Stafford area, the topic of setting boundaries or areas of interest could also be discussed. Yeah, and with that, I will be quiet and let you take it from here. I do want to acknowledge Steve and Kevin for their help and knowledge, and they are here, of course, can help answer any questions in their areas of expertise. So thank you.
Thanks, Charlotte. Questions or comments for Charlotte and/or staff? Council Brooks.
Thank you for the presentation. I guess I think it's really important for everybody to understand this area since it's right next to us, and especially with our deep concern about tolling and diversion, and understanding that. I am kind of confused about the whole origin of why we would be meeting. I don't see why, for me, being in the middle of litigation, having other parties not being chomping at the bit, I don't know why this, and with our like unanimous concerns about diversion and tolling already, why we would do this at this point. I also appreciate you talking about the focus that we've had on our planning, and we just finished that. So it's like a wide left for me as far as kind of what we just talked about like a week ago, or no, a month ago. Sorry, I was out of town. Feels like a week. Anyway, so those are my just initial thoughts on my lack of appetite for this.
President Pratt.
I think I'm at the same point here. I don't understand why we'd have talks when we're waiting to hear if the three-party IGA even is applicable, which we hopefully will be hearing about in the next few months. There's no infrastructure in the HB 1537, so I don't see where this is going to be an area that's going to be, the state's going to be pushing to develop. I mean, our biggest issue we know in this city is transportation, and since we've been talking about this, I've been down Borland Road so many times, and I can't imagine what it would take to widen that road to make it useful for this area. You've kind of gone over, like, the housing is the big thing that comes up, and that we have the ability to do that within our city. I'm also going to speak there. I know there's a lot of divergent groups out there with a lot of needs, but we have to look at what's in the best interest of Tualatin. And I don't see in any way where, at this point, this is anything that's in our interest.
Councilor Gonzalez.
I believe that the reason why this has come up again is because we're all trying to push back on the 205 tolling. And we want to make sure that this is in the mix, even more so as maybe a final blow for 205 tolling not to come in. Obviously, it's not one for the other, but in part of the big master plan is if this community does come in, which isn't likely anytime soon, it pushes the 205 tolling not to toll because there's no mitigation plan or anything. So I think for me, who is new to the council, getting this little update, it's really nice. You're right, it's way out in left field right now, and I know there's a lot of interested parties, but this is one strategy they were trying to employ discourage the tolling to come into 05. If not, this is not being considered for the long term, so.
Councilor Sacco.
Thank you, Sherilyn, for the presentation. I think it's helpful to revisit this and get the full overview, and I appreciate that. My initial thought was the same as Councilor Brooks and Councilor President Pratt was, why would we do anything if we're in current litigation? And I think that's really step one, is to find out what happens there. So I don't have an appetite to get into any conversation until we know where we stand with that. It seems like an obvious next step is to wait to see what comes out of that litigation. That's where I'm at. Thank you.
I don't think this is any way going to stop tolling no matter what happens there. I think that's going ahead. And we had too many people and too many different parties speaking to that, and they haven't heard us, so, or chosen to take actions based on what they've heard. That's all.
Councilor Brooks.
As far as a strategy around turning people off to tolling, I think for us to initiate something would be, I said this to somebody, a good strategy to reinvigorate our CIOs, because I think that people would start really getting concerned. I really take to heart a lot of the conversations that former Council President Grimes had with us around Fox Hills and their deep concerns over this issue. So there's that. And I also just want to say the goals that we have, I'm so excited about, especially, I mean, I had this great opportunity to see these artists, but what we're doing with Basalt Creek and the Cora and the redevelopment there and the Parks Bond, it's like was said, the city fights above its weight. And I think this is a big thing. And I remember just the build out, how many emails we got on one building. And this is a city, basically. So that's more about why it's beyond tolling, and I just think when we see other cities not listening to communities, what happens?
So the reason for the possible next step is because it's been 2 years since the three cities sat down together or Zoomed together to chat to see where they were at with, as was on the slide, the short-term planning, long-term planning. There's been change in leadership in West Lynn, so they'll get them up to speed. And just to sit down at the table, the three cities and Clackamas County, to see where we're all at. Like Sherilyn put it, laid out where we're looking financially and stuff like that. It's not to really move the needle at all. It's more just to check in with each other and see basically take the temperature. If all three cities are like, hell no, then that's basically where it's going to stay. All of us I know have been approached by Borderland landowners who very much want to develop and see an opportunity now. But with the three cities discussing this, coming up with the numbers, probably get that number adjusted for inflation is probably over $1 billion now on how much it's going to cost for infrastructure alone. This way the three cities can chat with each other and come back to these landowners and say, hey, we appreciate what you want to happen, but this is why we can't do it. And that's the reason for the possible meeting, is just to check with each city, see what's going on, see how they feel about, discuss what might happen out of this legislative session, like Sherilyn said, especially when they took the $200 million out of the package to fund housing. There's not $1 billion laying around the state. SDC fees don't really cover all the development costs. So that's the reason. Again, it's just check in with the two other cities. I know Clackamas County Chair Smith is very interested in developing the area, but will not, can't override the three cities. But she's getting chatted to and would like to discuss it. And this is where we can present our side to her. So that's the reason for the meeting. Other than that, it's not like we're going to change everything. It just, where are you at? Where are you at? Here's the county commissioner saying where she's at. Okay, let's, if we're all firmly against this, we'll come out and let the landowners know that it's not going to happen again for a little while, because between costs and lack of need and political transportation 205 issues, it's not going to happen for another, maybe a couple of years again. You had your hand up.
Yeah, I would be in support of just collaborative communication, of course. I think that would be a fine step. And so I apologize if I misread the next steps, but also, obviously interested in not doing anything until we, figure out what's going on. But always open to collaborative communication with other cities.
Reyes.
Thank you, Sherilyn, for the background and information about this. I also am in favor of possible conversations or discussions on what's going on, not to the extent of,
Pulling the
dissolving
trigger.
or anything like that, but it is good to check in and, hey, how are you doing, and where are we, and are we still there, are we still in agreement, kind of thing. So I'm in favor of that as well.
Councilperson Pratt.
Well, number one, back to do you want to talk now? Why wouldn't you just at least wait a few months till you know that decision on the Marks case? And I guess you just want to have a conversation, but since this is nothing we are looking to do anytime soon, like any staff time or anything to me could be better used.
Okay. Council Brooks.
I agree. I'm all about collaboration, but I don't know why we would be the ones instigating this. If the other cities were clamoring to get together, I could see it, but I don't see us taking a lead. In my mind, some of this feels like election season stuff, frankly, and I don't think that our city staff should be utilized like that. And I think that we're in the middle of litigation, so to me, it just doesn't seem like leadership. It doesn't feel like a wise thing for me. So I really just don't think it's the right time and the right reasons.
Okay. Before we keep going, I know Mr. Allen wanted to testify or have an opinion over this topic. Did you have it? You wanted to talk about this? No, he's through.
Yeah, Ken Allen again. I'll just be real brief. Prior to hearing Sherilyn and then your opinion on that, being a for-profit developer and a citizen Oregonian forever and a day, I'll still be working in 2060, but maybe, yeah, right. But to me, it strikes me as, wait, I agree, wait for litigation to see what comes of that, but also this particular area is an opportunity for the city of Tualatin to maybe take a leadership role to shape it in a responsible fashion, because right now, the way urban growth boundary works, it jets out a little bit. It's like patchwork. It's just a little bit here, a little bop out there, and you don't really get an opportunity to shape it. It's just another 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 acres, kind of like Salt Creek came down, albeit that is a really good move. And I was part of that, 15, 20 years ago, whenever that was, 04 or whatever. But I look to the west with Hillsborough. They've had a great opportunity to shape, Reed's Crossing in the last 10, 15 years, 20 years. Before that, Orenco Station, and it didn't detour from their city center and the Metropolitan. It just was an opportunity for them to bring transit in. And although, Orenco Station has transit right there, and that helps, Reed's Crossing doesn't as much, so maybe it's more akin to that. But there is, at the right time, I think, an opportunity for Tualatin, under your leadership, to maybe take that champion role and go, okay, LO and West Linn, how could that be shaped? And there are a lot of stakeholders in this area that are completely against any development, and I would put them in the exclusivity category, in air quotes, because they're wanting to protect their estates and their area, but that is exactly, when I was a kid, that's why they passed the urban growth boundary, and it is a good thing, so we can all get on our bike and get out in the country quicker. So where is that next big expansion going to come from? And maybe just being good stewards of that, you know, at the right time. So, but I do agree, wait for the litigation, because, you know, that's going to solve maybe any decision to be made there. But thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. Sure.
Well, oh, do you have someone else?
Oh, there's got someone on Zoom? Sure, yeah. Oh, is there anyone in the Zoom meeting who would like to state their opinion? Raise your hand on Zoom. Okay. Go ahead, Rick.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate all the hard work you do tonight and some really good conversations you had this evening. Some of the things about hitting home about gardening and some of the things we found out of COVID was the fact that having a safe, secure food source is very important, and that's what this area gives us. Another piece to just remember is that there is a plan for Stafford Hamlet. It's called our Community Vision Plan. We've worked on it. We've met with each 3 of the cities. Also talking about the Climate Action Plan and doing a regional plan where 4 out of the top 5 greenhouse gas emitters surround the Stafford Hamlet area. So to pile on and do more for that, and I've sent you, I'll apologize now for all the stuff I've been sending you to try to get some of the newer members up to speed. But so there is that, and if we embrace that, the community vision plan, which 86% of the people that voted in the Stafford Hamlet have always gone for conservation, small amounts of development. So that's probably the thing. And the fact that I think it was the 2018 where we had a big town hall, there was 3J Consultant actually came up, and he, Watson, I think was his last name, stated that the price tag for Stafford is $2.7 billion. That's with a B. So appreciate your work. And as I always joke, I said, you know, for us that live here, we kind of feel like we're Germany after World War II, just waiting to see who Russia is going to be and who England and France is going to divide us up. So we'd like to have some say and appreciate continue to be in the loop with you. Well, another thing, somebody said, yeah, we're always in the room, but we're never at the big kids table. So appreciate your work and looking forward to continue the education piece. And one last thing, and I thank you for this, is that, you know, Ken kind of mentioned that, well, you know, there's people that would like to do stuff with their property. There's nothing that says they can't sell it right now. We've talked about speculators saying, yeah, boy, this is going to be a great place. It's going to blow up. They put the freeway in, and now we're going to make tons of money. Well, there's some out there that say there's never going to be affordable housing out here. And so that's just another piece I wanted to get to. So appreciate what you do, and thank you for putting up with me.
All right, Rick. Is there anyone else, Nicole? All right. Now you have.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, I just want to make the point, this is my concern, is that we can start with a concept plan, but we can't adopt it or complete it until that I-205 thing is in process. And I'd hate to see again that we do this OTAC thing and spend a lot of money for something that is no longer usable.
Okay. Anyone else? So it comes down, what's the druthers of the council as far as holding the possible next step? I think I'm hearing like 3-3. Go ahead, Maria.
Does it require a lot of staff time to meet with these individuals and talk about that? Is that something that some of the councilor members, it's just you?
I'm not involving other staff.
Oh, okay. And the mayor, right? So it's, okay, thank you.
Councilman Gonzalez, he had his mic on.
More so, I'm okay with, for, just to check in, the check-in process of it.
I would want to wait to see how the litigation turns out.
Okay.
For me too, I just don't think the timing's right now, and I don't want to be the ones that take the lead on this.
With checking in possible conversations just to see how everyone's doing.
So it's 3-3. Yeah, or just let it go. Yeah. I'm looking at the, on the rare occasion where we've got a 3-3 vote.
Well, Your Honor, and maybe I can help, maybe assist in breaking the tie. As far as the litigation goes, just reading the tea leaves, so this will go back in front of the LCDC this summer, or late spring, early summer, we believe, for a hearing whether either one of these IGAs violate the regional framework plan, and would therefore the LCDC would issue an enforcement order. And I think that what Mr. Marks is wanting in his litigation is to invalidate that three-party IGA, which has that I-205 widening, which pretty much restricts anything happening for in foreseeable future, and amending the five-party IGA so that it is in compliance with state law and the Metro Code. And even if the LCDC, when they hear this, it's important to note that originally they forwarded this to a hearings officer at a contested case hearing, and that hearings officer concluded that while it was a land use decision under the significant impacts test, it was neither IGA violated Metro's regional framework plan. But LCDC didn't use that. They just stated it wasn't a land use decision under the significant impacts test. So it's certainly possible that the LCDC could just incorporate the hearings officer's decision, which means that, again, I'm not Mr. Marks's attorney. There's a good chance there might be an appeal of that. And conversely, if the LCDC were to issue an enforcement order regarding one of our IGAs, again, reading the tea leaves, there's a possibility there might be some further action after that. So there might not be a final legal decision in this next year. I don't know if that helps. And if you're looking for general direction on a tie, I think that you would need something. You would need a decision to take that affirmative action to actually have that meeting, and we don't have that yet. We're stuck at 3-3.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that if, considering that some people might be leaving in 2 to 3 years, I think that it'll be good for, I didn't know how much staff time it was going to take or who's going to be there, but I think it'll be good for the mayor and the city manager to start thinking about what that would look like, or have a conversation just to say hi and check in, since it's been a while. So I'm not asking other staff members to do it, but if it's Charlene and the mayor, I can see them and I trust them knowing exactly what to check in and see how things are going, and maybe envision something for the future.
Okay. So we're still at 3-3 though, right? So I guess we'll.
My thing is, if the other cities have an appetite for it, they can call a meeting just like we could. So I don't see them doing that, and I don't think when you have an agreement like this, it sounds like you're being a good player to bring everybody to the table, but if they're not really wanting to do that right now, it's really not being a good player. So I don't like working like that with people. That's just it for me.
Okay. So we can table this for. Maybe the legislative session.
Maybe the legislative session, as we do a debrief of the legislative session, something will come out of that that'll instigate.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, based on what
Conversation.
happens with the governor's housing bill, maybe there will be an impact we're not envisioning in Stafford. And then we will then need to meet.
Yeah, but I think everybody would be on board like that.
I don't know if they'd still be on board. You're gonna have people who fight it, that do not want Stafford developed at all, so. Oh, yeah, yeah. All right, so we'll just table it at this time till we'll wait after the legislative session's done and see how the bills turned out. All right, so that brings us to council communications, I believe, right? We had no items removed from consent, council communications. Okay, Council Brooks.
It's kind of interesting 'cause since we've been talking about this, the Stafford area, and I think that everybody was CC'd on the concern around the traffic circle going in did everyone get CC'd on that by Wilsonville? Did you get that? Oh, okay. I've heard that there's concern about an expense on, it's in Stafford. I forget which road it is. I think it's down by Lee Farms a little bit, and there's a traffic circle that's, looks like it's quite a bit of money, and I guess it comes from the Clackamas Fund, and the question was asked how that impacts us, what we have to pay into it as part of a collaborative partner on that. And I know for myself, when we've talked about traffic circles here in our city, because they're so tricky with traffic backup and everything like that, that we're really cautious around those. So especially with the tolling on the table and everything like that, I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware around that, and I'll forward the email to you, Sherilyn. I just thought it was an all council, I'm sorry to bring it up like that.
But it's in unincorporated Clackamas County, correct?
It's in unincorporated Clackamas County, yeah.
So we have no say.
I just think I think it's something we should know about, especially when we're talking about these things that we're talking about, like, how are people playing with us?
Yes, Councilor Sacco. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to let everybody know that the second annual Pride Stride date has been set for June 22nd, so mark your calendars. We're looking forward to another great event.
Anything else? I'll look back and forth now.
I'd like
Go
to
ahead.
motion to adjourn.
All right.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Good night. Have a good evening.